My 8-year-old son was being bullied at his new school because of the burn scars on his arms. When the school failed to stop the harassment, I decided to confront the bully's father myself. I expected anger, denial, maybe even a fight. What I didn't expect was for this stranger to look at my son's scars and whisper, "I know those scars." I had no idea who the man standing in front of me was. Before we begin, I'd love to know, have you ever discovered an unexpected connection with someone that changed your perspective completely? Share your experience in the comments below. And please subscribe for more stories about the power of human connection and second chances. Now, let me take you back to the day when my son's scars revealed a truth that would change both our lives forever. I'd been a single father for 5 years now, ever since the apartment fire that took my wife Hannah and left my 3-year-old son Ethan with burn scars covering 30% of his body. The physical scars had healed as well as they could, but the emotional ones, for both of us, were still raw. Ethan was 8 now, a bright, sensitive kid who loved dinosaurs and building with Legos. He was also incredibly resilient, having adapted to life with his scars better than I had ever imagined possible. But that resilience was being tested at his new school in ways that broke my heart. We'd moved to a different district within the city because I'd gotten a promotion that required a longer commute, and the new school district was supposed to be better. What I hadn't anticipated was how cruel children could be to someone who looked different. It started small. Whispered comments, stares, kids avoiding sitting next to Ethan at lunch, but it escalated quickly when one particular boy, Tyler Thompson, decided to make my son's life miserable. "Dad," Ethan said one evening as I was helping him with homework, "am I a monster?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean, buddy?" "He says I look like a monster because of my arms. He says that's why my mom died, because monsters can't have normal families." I felt rage building in my chest, the kind of protective fury that only a parent can understand. "Ethan, look at me," I said, kneeling down to his level. "You are not a monster. You are brave and kind and smart and the best son any dad could ask for. Those scars on your arms, they're proof that you're a survivor. They're proof that you're stronger than anything life can throw at you." Then why does Tyler say those things? Because some people don't understand that being different doesn't mean being less. And sometimes when people don't understand something, they get scared, and when they get scared, they say mean things. But my reassurances weren't enough to stop what was happening at school. The bullying got worse. Tyler convinced other kids to avoid Ethan, calling him the burned kid and making up stories about how his scars were contagious. Ethan started having nightmares again, something that hadn't happened in over a year. He begged me not to make him go to school. I tried working with the school first. I met with Ethan's teacher, Mrs. Alvarez, who was sympathetic but seemed overwhelmed. "Mr. Walsh, I've spoken to Tyler several times. I've also contacted his parents, but honestly, bullying is such a complex issue, and Tyler is, well, he's dealing with some challenges at home." "What kind of challenges?" I asked.
I can't share specifics due to privacy concerns, but let's just say his family situation is complicated. His father is struggling with some personal issues. I met with the principal next, a well-meaning woman named Dr. Norris, who spoke in educational jargon about restorative justice and conflict resolution strategies. "We're implementing a comprehensive anti-bullying program," she assured me. "Tyler will be participating in peer mediation sessions, and we're going to have a school-wide assembly about acceptance and inclusion." But weeks passed, and nothing changed. If anything, Tyler seemed emboldened by the lack of real consequences. The final straw came when Ethan came home with his favorite dinosaur t-shirt torn. "Tyler grabbed it during recess," Ethan explained, trying not to cry. "He said monsters don't deserve nice things." That night, after Ethan was asleep, I made a decision. The school wasn't protecting my son, so I would handle this myself. I was going to pay Tyler Thompson's family a visit. I found their address in the school directory and drove over on a Saturday morning. The house was in a modest neighborhood, a small ranch-style home with an overgrown yard and peeling paint. There was a pickup truck in the driveway and a motorcycle covered by a tarp in the garage. I knocked on the front door, my heart pounding with a mixture of anger and determination. I had rehearsed what I was going to say. I was going to explain that their son was tormenting mine, how they needed to take responsibility and put a stop to it. The door opened, and I found myself face to face with a man who looked to be in his early 40s. He was tall, with graying hair and tired eyes that spoke of someone who had seen too much. There were faint scars on his hands and forearms, and he moved with the careful precision of someone who had been injured and learned to compensate. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice cautious but not unfriendly. "Are you Tyler Thompson's father?" "I am. Gene Thompson. And you are?" "Jeremy Walsh. My son Ethan is in Tyler's class at school." I watched as recognition flickered across his face, followed quickly by what looked like resignation. "Ah," he said, stepping back slightly. "I think I know why you're here. Please, come in." The inside of the house was clean but sparse, with the kind of furniture that looked like it had been chosen for function rather than style. There were a few family photos on the mantel, and I noticed that in the more recent ones, Tyler was always with just his father, no mother in sight. "Can I get you some coffee?" Gene asked, gesturing toward the kitchen. "This isn't a social call," I said, my anger returning. "Your son has been bullying mine for weeks. He's making Ethan's life hell, and the school doesn't seem to be doing anything about it." Gene's shoulders sagged slightly. "I know," he said quietly. "I've been trying to work with Tyler on his behavior, but he's been angry lately. We've both been going through a rough patch." "A rough patch doesn't give him the right to torment other children," I said, my voice rising. "Do you know what he's been saying to my son? He calls him a monster because of his scars. He tells him that's why his mother died." Gene's face went pale. "What he said?" "You heard me. Your son is psychologically torturing an 8-year-old boy because he looks different." "Mr. Walsh, I am so sorry. I had no idea Tyler was saying things like that. I knew there had been some incidents at school, but the teacher just said he was being unkind to another student. She didn't tell me he was—" Gene ran his hair through his hair. "This is unacceptable. I will deal with Tyler immediately."
"It's gone beyond just dealing with Tyler," I said. "My son is afraid to go to school. He's having nightmares again. He thinks he's a monster because of what your son has been telling him." "Scars?" Gene asked suddenly, his voice strange. "You mentioned scars. What kind of scars?" The question caught me off guard. "Burn scars. On his arms and part of his chest. He was in a fire when he was 3. Gene went very still, his face losing even more color. Would you mind if I saw them, the scars?" "Why?" I asked, suddenly suspicious. "What does it matter what they look like?" "Please," Gene said, and there was something desperate in his voice. "I need to see them." Something in his tone made me reconsider. I pulled up my phone and showed him a recent photo of Ethan at the beach, where his scars were clearly visible on his arms and shoulder. Gene stared at the photo for a long moment, and I watched as his hands began to shake. "Oh my God," he whispered. "I know those scars." "What do you mean you know them?" Gene looked up at me, his eyes filled with a pain so deep it was almost physical. "Mr. Walsh, what was your wife's name?" "Hannah. Hannah Walsh. Why?" "And the fire, it was 5 years ago, an apartment building on George Street?" My blood ran cold. "How do you know that?" Gene sat down heavily in his chair, his face in his hands. "Because I was there," he said, his voice barely audible. I was the firefighter who pulled your son out of that building. The world seemed to tilt sideways. I stared at this man, this stranger who had just claimed to be part of the worst day of my life, and tried to process what he was telling me. That's impossible, I said. The firefighter who saved Ethan, his name was Thompson? Eugene Thompson is my full name, Jean said quietly. I felt like I was going to be sick. You're him. You're the firefighter who saved your son, yes, and who couldn't save your wife. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at this broken man sitting across from me, and suddenly everything made sense. His tired eyes, his careful movements, the scars on his hands, the absence of Tyler's mother in the family photos. You were injured in the fire, I said, remembering what the fire chief had told me afterward. The firefighter who saved Ethan was hurt when part of the ceiling collapsed. Gene nodded, rolling up his sleeves to reveal more extensive scarring on his arms. Crushed my left shoulder, broke 3 ribs, second-degree burns on my arms and back. But that wasn't the worst of it. What was the worst of it? The worst of it was that I could only make one trip up those stairs before the building became too unstable. I had to choose. I could save your son, or I could try to reach your wife. I couldn't do both. I felt tears starting to fall, but they weren't tears of anger anymore. They were tears of understanding, of recognition, of shared grief. You saved my son, I said quietly. But I couldn't save your wife. I've carried that with me every day for 5 years. The knowledge that I made a choice, and because of that choice, a woman died and a little boy lost his mother. Jean, I said, and my voice was steady now, you didn't make a choice. You made the only choice you could make. You saved a 3-year-old child. But your wife... My wife was already unconscious from smoke inhalation when you got there. The fire chief told me afterward. She wouldn't have survived even if you had reached her first. But Ethan was still conscious, still fighting. You saved the one person who could be saved. Jean looked up at me with surprise. You don't blame me? Blame you? Jean, I've spent 5 years grateful to a firefighter named Eugene Thompson who risked his life to save my son. I never imagined I'd get the chance to thank him in person. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us processing the impossible coincidence that had brought us together. Is that why you left the fire department? I asked. Jean nodded. The physical injuries healed mostly, but the emotional ones? I started drinking, started having panic attacks every time the alarm went off. I couldn't do the job anymore, couldn't trust myself to make those kinds of decisions. And Tyler's mother? Left 2 years ago, said she couldn't handle being married to a broken man. Jean's voice was bitter. Tyler blames me for her leaving. He's been angry ever since, acting out at school, getting into fights. I've been trying to help him, but I'm barely keeping my own head above water. So he's been taking his anger out on other kids. Apparently. And I'm ashamed to say I didn't realize how bad it had gotten. Jean looked at me with genuine remorse. Mr. Walsh, I am so sorry. Not just for Tyler's behavior, but for everything. For not being able to save your wife, for the pain you and your son have endured. I stood up and walked over to where Jean was sitting. Jean, look at me. He raised his eyes to meet mine. You have nothing to apologize for. You are a hero. You saved my son's life, and you nearly died doing it. The fact that Tyler has been bullying Ethan doesn't change that. But Tyler doesn't know, Jean said quietly. He doesn't know about the fire, about your son. He just sees a kid with scars and he's been cruel. Then maybe it's time he learned the truth. Jean was quiet for a long moment. You're right, he said finally. Tyler needs to understand what real courage looks like and what real consequences are. Where is he now? In his room. He's been grounded for the past week because of a fight at school. Jean stood up. Would you be willing to stay while I talk to him? I think he needs to hear this story, and I think he needs to meet the boy whose life I saved. Ethan's not with me today. He's at his grandmother's house. That's okay. Tyler needs to hear this first, then maybe we can arrange for the boys to meet properly. Jean called Tyler downstairs, and I watched as a sullen-looking boy of about 8 trudged into the living room. He had his father's dark hair and the same tired eyes, but there was an anger in his expression that spoke of pain he was too young to understand. Tyler, Jean said. His voice was firm but gentle. This is Mr. Walsh. He's Ethan's father. Tyler's expression immediately became defensive. I didn't do anything. Son, sit down. We need to have a conversation.
For the next hour, Jean told Tyler the story of the fire. He explained about his job as a firefighter, about the day he had to choose between saving a woman or a child, about how he had carried a 3-year-old boy out of a burning building and nearly died in the process. Tyler listened with growing amazement and horror. The little boy I saved, Jean said, was Ethan, the boy you've been calling a monster. Tyler's face went white. Ethan? But his scars are proof that he survived something that should have killed him. They're proof that he's braver and stronger than most adults I know. But I called him... Tyler's voice trailed off as the full weight of what he had done began to sink in. You called him a monster, Jean said quietly. You tormented a child who had already lost his mother and nearly lost his own life. Tyler began to cry then, not the angry tears of a frustrated child, but the deep, remorseful sobs of someone who truly understood the magnitude of their actions. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I know you didn't know, Jean said, pulling his son into a hug. But that's not an excuse. We don't get to be cruel to people just because we don't understand their story. Can I tell him I'm sorry? I spoke up for the first time since Jean had begun his story. Tyler, I think Ethan would like that very much. But more than an apology, I think he'd like a friend. A friend? Someone who sees him for who he really is. A brave, kind, smart boy who happens to have some scars. Tyler nodded eagerly. I want to be his friend. I want to make up for what I did. The following Monday, I walked Ethan to school myself. He was nervous, clutching my hand tightly as we approached the building. Dad, what if Tyler is mean to me again? I don't think he will be, buddy. But if he is, you come find me immediately, okay? We were barely through the front door when Tyler appeared, his father right behind him. Jean and I had arranged this meeting, but Ethan didn't know what to expect. Tyler walked up to Ethan, his face serious but kind. Ethan, I'm Tyler. I'm sorry. Ethan looked up at me uncertainly, then back at Tyler. I was really mean to you, Tyler continued. I called you names and made you feel bad about your scars. But I didn't know. I didn't know that you're a hero. A hero? Ethan asked, confused. Tyler looked back at his father, who nodded encouragingly. My dad told me about the fire, about how he saved you when you were little.
He said your scars aren't ugly. They're proof that you're the bravest person he ever met. Ethan's eyes widened, and he looked up at Jean with recognition dawning on his face. You're the firefighter, the one who carried me out? Jean knelt down to Ethan's level, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I am. And I've thought about you every single day for 5 years, wondering if you were okay, if you were happy, if you remembered anything about that day. I remember someone holding me, Ethan said quietly. Someone telling me I was going to be okay. Was that you? That was me, Jean said with his voice thick with emotion. And you were okay. You were so much more than okay. You grew up to be an amazing, brave little boy. Tyler stepped forward again. Ethan, I was really mean to you because I was angry about other stuff, and I took it out on you. That was wrong. Really, really wrong. Can you maybe forgive me? Ethan looked at Tyler for a long moment, then at his father, then at me. My dad always says that forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves, not just other people. That's right, buddy.
Okay, Ethan said to Tyler. I forgive you, but you have to promise not to be mean to other kids who look different. I promise, Tyler said solemnly. And can we be friends? I could show you my Lego collection. Your dad said you like building things. For the first time in weeks, I saw Ethan's face light up with genuine excitement. You have Legos? What kind? All kinds. I have the big Millennium Falcon and some dinosaur sets and... As the boys began chattering about their shared interests, Jean and I stepped aside. Thank you, he said quietly, for bringing him here today, for letting Tyler apologize, for forgiving me. Jean, there's nothing to forgive, but I do have something to ask you. Anything. Ethan's been having some tough days lately, not just because of the bullying, but because he's been asking more questions about the fire, about his mother, about what happened that day. I think it might help him to hear the story from you, to understand that someone fought for him, that someone risked everything to save him. Jean nodded. I'd be honored to tell him, whenever you think he's ready. How about this weekend? You and Tyler could come over for dinner. Ethan could show Tyler his dinosaur collection, and maybe afterward you could tell him about that day. The parts that are appropriate for an 8-year-old to hear. I'd like that very much. That Saturday evening, Jean and Tyler came to our house for dinner. It was the first time in months that I'd heard Ethan laugh so freely. He and Tyler had bonded over their shared love of dinosaurs and Legos, and Tyler had proven to be a kind, thoughtful friend once his anger had been redirected into understanding. After dinner, while the boys played in the living room, Jean told Ethan the story of the fire. He kept it age-appropriate, focusing on the bravery of the firefighters, the importance of smoke detectors, and how proud he was of how strong Ethan had been. Were you scared? Ethan asked. I was. But being scared doesn't mean you're not brave. Being brave means doing the right thing even when you're scared. Is that why you saved me, even though you were scared? I saved you because that's what firefighters do. We protect people. And you, Ethan, were worth protecting. Ethan was quiet for a moment, then he rolled up his sleeves and showed Jean his scars. Do they look different now than they did when I was little? Jean examined the scars carefully, his expression thoughtful. They look like they've healed beautifully. Your doctors did an amazing job. But you know what I see when I look at them? What? I see proof that you're a fighter. I see evidence that you survived something that would have defeated a lot of people. I see the marks of a warrior. A warrior? That's right. These scars are your battle wounds, and they tell the story of a battle you won. From that day forward, everything changed. Tyler became Ethan's closest friend and fiercest protector at school. When other kids stared at Ethan's scars or asked rude questions, Tyler would step in and explain that Ethan was a fire survivor, a real-life hero. Jean and I developed an unlikely friendship built on shared experience and mutual respect. He started attending AA meetings and working with a therapist to deal with his PTSD. I helped him navigate the process of getting back on his feet, and he helped me understand that it was okay to let other people into our lives, that Ethan and I didn't have to face the world alone.
6 months later, Jean had been sober for 4 months and was working as a fire safety instructor, teaching children about fire prevention and safety. Tyler had transformed from an angry, acting-out child into a confident, empathetic boy who stood up for other kids who were being bullied. "You know what's funny?" Jean said one evening as we watched the boys playing in my backyard. "I spent 5 years thinking I had failed that day, thinking I hadn't done enough, hadn't saved enough. And now? Now I realize that saving Ethan wasn't just about that one day. It was about giving him the chance to become who he is now. It was about giving you the chance to raise an incredible kid. It was about creating a ripple effect that's still spreading." What do you mean? Look at Tyler. A few months ago, he was angry and hurting and taking it out on other kids. Now he's learned about courage and compassion and standing up for people who need help. That's because of Ethan. That's because of the example your son set. I watched as Ethan patiently helped Tyler build a complicated Lego structure, the two boys working together with the easy camaraderie of true friends. "You're right," I said. "Ethan's scars used to be a source of shame for him. Now they're a source of strength. And Tyler's learned that real strength isn't about making other people feel small. It's about lifting them up." A year later, Jean was back to full-time work as a fire safety coordinator for the school district. Tyler and Ethan were inseparable best friends, and I had learned that sometimes the most unexpected connections can become the most meaningful relationships in our lives. The scars that had once made my son a target for bullying had become the bridge that connected our family to people who understood our journey in ways no one else could. Jean had saved Ethan's life in that fire 5 years ago, but in many ways, Ethan had saved Jean's life too, by giving him a chance to see that his actions that day had mattered, that the choice he'd made had been the right one, that he was still the hero he'd always been. Sometimes I think about how different our lives would have been if I hadn't decided to confront Tyler's father that day, if I had just accepted the school's inadequate response to the bullying, if I had transferred Ethan to yet another school, if I had let anger and frustration drive my decisions instead of love and determination. But I'm grateful every day that I made the choice to fight for my son, because in fighting for him, I found something I didn't even know we were missing: a family that understood our story, friends who saw Ethan's scars as marks of courage rather than difference, and a community built on the foundation of shared experience and mutual support. Ethan's scars will always be part of his story, but now, instead of being a source of shame or pain, they're a reminder of his strength, his survival, and the incredible connections that can grow from the most unexpected places. They're proof that sometimes our greatest wounds can become our greatest gifts, and the people who understand our pain the best are often the ones who helped us survive it in the first place. An absolutely powerful story about how our greatest pain can become the bridge to our greatest healing, and how the scars we carry can connect us to people who understand our journey in ways no one else can. What do you think of Jean's transformation from a broken man carrying guilt to someone who found purpose again? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this incredible story about forgiveness, unexpected connections, and the healing power of truth, please show your support by hitting that like button, and be sure to subscribe for more inspiring stories that prove we're all more connected than we realize. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.